Hey peers, let's get a start on part 2 of our vocab, and let's start with Prince Henry the Navigator. Prince Henry the Navigator was from Portugal. He was a prince, but wasn't going to make his way to become king, so he sought his riches through exploration. He was also a Christian and wanted to spread Christianity, especially against Islam, which had previously taken over Spain during the post-classical era. And now Spain was becoming more Christian. So he sponsors these explorations that brings Portugal into discovering the coast of Africa. Very significant, as this will lead to more exploration and future trade colonies for Portugal in both Africa, Asia, and even South America. And it will lead to future expeditions by people like Bartolome Diaz and Vasco da Gama, amongst others. Reconquista, there's a pretty good definition right over there. Reconquista was basically a Spanish and Portuguese word for reconquest. It was the period where several Christian kingdoms slowly expanded and took over all of the Iberian Peninsula. The Iberian Peninsula is the land known as Portugal and Spain in Europe. So they were able to take away the states from Al-Andalus and take over from the Muslim conquerors who had taken this over back in the Umayyad Caliphate. So this is basically the Christian kingdoms taking land back from the Muslims. Very significant, especially in this era, because it leads to our modern countries of Spain and Portugal, which become major maritime empires of the early modern period. And it's very important in spreading Christianity and a decline in Islam that also happens during this period from the past as well. Absolutism. Absolutism is basically a monarchy or a kingdom, where an empire where the king has absolute power. When we think about absolutism in the early modern era, we think about the European kings in places like France, in Spain, which will become the Holy Roman Empire. I know it sounds kind of weird. We think of these absolute rulers who have absolute power to tax and cannot be denied, pretty much. This is Louis XIV of France. We'll learn more about him. He's an example of an absolute empire, built this huge palace at Versailles. Absolutism is basically when an emperor or a king has absolute power. Many European countries like France, even England, and Spain, Portugal, had absolute power in their governments with their kings. The divine right of kings was basically the idea that God was on top and that God gave power to the monarch or to the king. Louis XIV of France in the early modern era definitely believed this, or at least he made the people believe it. It's the idea that God, monarch, nobles, and the people were below them, and that God chose the king to rule, so the king should be ruling, and the king needs to be listened to 100%. It's a little bit like the mandate of heaven without the responsibilities for the monarch. He's just given power and he gets to have it. He doesn't have the responsibility that comes with it. But this is very important because many European powers like France in the early modern era have this belief in the divine right of kings, that kings can pretty much rule how they want because God put them in power. King Philip II, a ruler who was able to grow and expand the Spanish Empire as they became stronger and started taking over more land, and here would become the Holy Roman Empire. So King Philip II was a great ruler who allowed Spain to grow and become even more powerful. Charles V was another ruler of Spain who took even more land over in the Holy Roman Empire. And you can see Charles's empire was simply huge as he was able to take over the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, parts of Italy. Look at the time period that's going on when Charles V is ruling. He's significant because Spain is making gains in the Americas, taking over empires over there. In his lifetime, both the Aztec and Inca Empire fall. Spanish silver gets established in places like Potosi, and he's able to establish this huge empire. He wants to take over England and add it to it, but he's unable to do it as his armada or ships don't quite make it. They sink. There's a video on that you'll watch later. But very significant for enlarging and making Spain a more powerful maritime or sea empire of the early modern era. All right, William of Orange. William of Orange is basically the person most responsible for the Dutch Republic becoming free of Spain. He's able to basically fight against Spain and allow them to become eventually an independent country. This also happens with our next word, the 80 Years' War. The 80 Years' War is important and significant. It was a war that was fought where the Dutch were fighting for basically their freedom against the Holy Roman Empire and Spain. Holy Roman Empire and Spain, remember, they're together. The 80 Years' War, they're fighting against them. What happens is basically 17 provinces or 17 different lands fight and rebel against the Spain and are able to form what will be known in this era as the Dutch Republic or Dutch Empire. That's significant because Dutch will also become a major trade power, especially in spices in Southeast Asia during the early modern period. All right, the stadtholder. Here's a general definition. It's not the best, but a stadtholder is pretty much the person who was in charge of the Dutch Republic. Now, the stadtholder, William of Orange would be an example of a stadtholder who led the Dutch revolt against the Spanish Empire. You want to think of them as a hereditary role. It's kind of like a king. They are officially to rule the Dutch monarchy, or called the Dutch Republic, as the Dutch was becoming more powerful at this time. Just a reminder that the stadtholder recognizes that the Dutch really are into trade big time. They don't want to just go and take resources. They're into establishing more trading posts, and it actually benefits them as they begin the VOC, or the Dutch East Indian Company, in the early modern period. And the stadtholder is the person in power of the Dutch Republic or Dutch Empire during the early modern era. The VOC is the Dutch East Indian Company. You need to know that if you see this symbol on the test. It's the East Indian Company. It's the Dutch. It's important because they're able to establish a lot of trade, a lot of commercial interest. They're able to spread out to the world and make a lot of money with their trade. The Dutch East Indian Company was a private company. It wasn't run by the government, although the Dutch government tried to help them a lot. So the VOC was an independent organization, independent company that went and established trade links all over the world. It ended up making the Dutch Republic more powerful, and it made itself real powerful, as we see both with the Dutch East Indian Company and British East Indian Company. And these private companies, in combination with their government, are able to make a lot of money through trade, especially trade that has a military, like the Dutch, behind them. All right, our next word is Henry VIII.
I'm Henry VIII, I am. Henry VIII, I am. I got married to the widow next door. She's been married 7 times before, and everyone
White people, seriously, what is the deal with us? This Henry VIII is who we meant. Okay. Henry VIII was the King of England at this time. Henry VIII was able to do a lot of things like advance the English military and make England into a stronger place. However, he's also known for what's called the King's Great Matter. The King's Great Matter, which was the fact that he was married and he didn't have a son. So he was married to his wife. His first wife was Catherine of Aragon, who was actually the aunt to Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. It's the royal family. So she's a pretty big deal. Charles V is like the most powerful person in the world at this time. That's Henry VIII's wife. So what happens is Henry wants a son, but he can't have one. So he does the thing that, the manly thing to do, and he blames his wife. So what basically happens is he wants a divorce, but he can't get the divorce. So he asks the Pope for a divorce, but the Pope won't do it because the Holy Roman Empire has control of Rome, and that is Charles V has control of Rome. He's not going to let his auntie get a divorce. So what happens is Henry decides to get a divorce, and since the Pope won't do it, the church won't let him get a divorce from his wife, he decides he's going to make his own church. So he has his own Reformation that happens in England, and they start the Anglican Church. He then meets his wife, Anne Boleyn, who's his second wife, who my professor in England called a scheming bitch. I'll never forget Christina. She was amazing. Anyway, so what was I talking about again? Oh, yeah. He marries Anne Boleyn, and then she can't give him a son, so he offs her and kills her, too. He ends up getting married many times to many wives, and eventually does have a son who's never able to take power. But the real significance of this is that England becomes a Protestant nation and not Catholic because this guy couldn't have a son. He did have daughters, though. We'll get to one of them in a little bit. Or we'll get to one of his daughters right now. Elizabeth I, who was a daughter of Henry VIII. Now, Elizabeth, she was a Protestant, and England had just gone through a civil war. Her sister had tried to change it back to a Catholic country, and she came in and she wanted to be Protestant. So what she did was, she goes, how about I just combine the Protestant and Catholic churches a bit, and we'll try to make everybody happy. And she's actually able to do it. She's able to defeat the Spanish, too, at the Spanish Armada, and establish England as a great kingdom, or I should say queendom, at this time. In addition to this, she is also able to expand England's land. But she's really smart because she really projects herself as like the model of what England's supposed to be. She calls herself the Virgin. She's called the Virgin Queen. We don't know if that's true, but she didn't get married. Why didn't she get married? Because she knew if she got married, that guy would probably try to become king and rule over her. So she never got married, and she called herself a virgin. And we'll stick with that story. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so she's able to project her image of being like this pure queen, and she's able to inspire England, and probably is the most successful monarch in England's history. And that is Elizabeth I. All right, our next person who we're going to talk about is Sir Francis Drake.
You used to.
No, Sir Francis Drake. No, not
You used to
that
call me
Drake.
on my cell
Sir
phone.
Francis. All right, there he is. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, this guy didn't have a cell phone. So, Sir Francis Drake, he is either known as a pirate or a hero. He's actually a pirate. He's from England, and he was a pirate who used to especially steal from Spanish ships and was really good at it, and would bring the money back to England. In England, he was seen as a hero. In Spain and the Holy Roman Empire, he was seen as a pirate, which he was, because pirates are people who go on ships and steal things from other ships. He was able to help make England into a richer power. He actually ends up sailing around the world, which is pretty amazing. And he's even a factor in defeating the Spanish Armada when Spain tries to come and take over England. That is Sir Francis Drake. Pretty significant guy. Even more significant than this guy. Although I don't think he had those dance moves. The Spanish Armada. Okay, the Spanish Armada was a huge bunch of ships from Spain, and actually the Holy Roman Empire, since they ruled both at that time. And they were sent to England to destroy England, to teach them a lesson from stealing from them with Sir Francis Drake, and to get more power. However, the weather played in England's favor. They were able to defeat the Spanish Armada because of a storm, and England was able to remain strong and will grow in power, and Spain will start decreasing in power after this defeat. Pretty significant for who will have more power in the modern era. All right, our next 3 words, I'm not going to rush these 3, so I'm going to make a new video and I'm going to link it on the site, so go to video number 3 for our next 3 words.